So I'm delighted to be in conversation with Iffat Nawaz today. Born in Bangladesh, Iffat has worked in the humanitarian and development sector in USA, Asia, and Africa before settling into a writer and devotee's life in Pondicherry. And we will be talking about Shurjo's Clan, which is her debut novel, about a girl called Shurjo Mukhi and her family members as they deal with the secondhand trauma of war, displacement, personal tragedies, and identity crisis. It's a coming of age story, which is suffused with so much hope and light, where Shurjo Mukhi is almost like a metaphor for the young country of Bangladesh itself. Greetings to you, Iffat, and thank you so much for taking the time out to discuss Shurjo's Clan and writing in general with me.
Thank you so much, Priyadarshini. That's a very, prolific introduction. And I think earlier also I've had conversations with you where I think you see things in a way that actually makes me happier that I wrote this because, pieces of it that I thought might be lost in translation or in different hands. You've really put it together very beautifully. So
thank you. I mean, the reader is just a reflection of, what the reader reads. So it's just the book that inspires the thoughts. And thank you for writing this book.
Thank you. I'm glad I did. Yes.
So I'll start with my questions. We'll start with Shurjo Mukhi itself. Right from Shurjo Mukhi's name, the sunflower and the sun is a recurring motif and metaphor in Shurjo's clan. So yes. What came first, the story or the metaphor?
So the story I inherited, there is a semi-autobiographical element to Shurjo Mukhi's clan, Shurjo's clan. That was the full name was Shurjo Mukhi's clan, and then we chopped it a bit. So the name definitely came later and many, many years later. So I was trying to write this story since 2016, April. And, I think I had it in me from way before. I also grew up in a household with two uncles who passed away during the war, gave their lives, and all of that were kind of based on some truth. So I was carrying it, but when you're young, you don't really know how to process things, or you don't even know, you just take anything for what it is. And until later on, when you have developed a personality and you realize, why am I like this, or what is it, why am I not like that? And then you realize, oh, I'm carrying parts of some others, maybe, and conditioning from somewhere else that I never even thought of or I was aware of. So that's when I think when I was piecing that together is when I realized this story has been with me for a long time. And when I first wrote the draft, it was really heavy and, it was more about baggage, carrying baggage, as opposed to, inheritance as baggage, but not inheritance as something you maybe can dissolve if it's for the best. So the first draft was like that. And, it happened in Pondicherry and I was really kind of down and I'm not sure like if such a heavy book is needed. Another war story. Why? Why give people another sad story and of burden to be carried? And that's when I was also studying Sri Aurobindo a lot. And I used to go to the Samadhi a lot here. And that day I'd gone after I finished my first draft and I just felt like simplifying everything. And I got stuck there. I didn't know how to simplify the story. But in the meantime, I was kind of really devoted to Sri Aurobindo and the mother's work. And there is a special thing in the ashram called, it's spiritual significances of flowers. So each flower, I think 700 some flowers are given spiritual significance. And Shurjo Mukhi, as in the sunflower, is a consciousness turned towards light. So yeah, so when I don't know when it happened, but at some point I realized as I was approaching the story from different directions to figure out how to write this, at some point I realized I myself had to keep towards light, otherwise it would just drop and like become dark and I would just look into the abyss all the time. So it was almost as a reminder to myself that I named Shurjo Mukhi, Shurjo Mukhi, so that it was, I never feel like the heaviness of it will, I was reminded, nope, keep it light. She's Shurjo. Even if she goes down, she has to come up.
This book, talks about such heavy themes, but that's the thing, it has this touch of lightness to it. And it has this feeling of hope at least towards the end. But even when you're, reading about the trauma and all, somehow it doesn't weigh so heavily on it. It seems more like you're processing through it. So was this something like a spiritual experience for you writing this book?
Yes, absolutely. And it started with Shantori, and she was this like mythical character I fell in love with. I created and felt like she was almost real. And I think a journey with her, my first draft was called Adventures of Santori. So Santori is, as you know, one of the characters in the book. And she is quite a strong one. And so it was her story that I was telling in the beginning. And I think that had sort of helped me understand what not to do, and also how intense do you want things to be all the time, because these are things that are intense. But like, if she was the protagonist as opposed to Shurjo, you can tell the story would be very different, because she just carries this intensity, not that, and the innocence is also a little tainted, and grown up. So that was sort of the thing of it. But sorry, I actually like went off into my own talking thing, and I don't know if I answered your question.
Absolutely. Well, that's what we were discussing. When you write, it's like you start making connections, perhaps, because you were talking about the flowers and the significance of the flowers, the sunflower, and how it connects to the sun. It looks towards the sun. But
Right.
interestingly, the flag of Bangladesh also has that red dot, which is the sun.
The sun. Yeah,
Where these
exactly.
things connect together, uh, I mean, these have to come out through a process of writing.
Yes, definitely. And like you said, the spiritual process. And I think for me, the two are very connected. And I cannot just sit down and write. I think each writer has their own way of approaching, what they do. But for me, it's very important that I am in a very in a place where I feel clarity. I can sense what I'm feeling and understanding, and there's a deeper thing to it. Otherwise, it just feels like I'm writing garbage, and that's also needed, of course, to get certain things out. But I don't trust it. So for me, being quiet, or trusting that I trust myself when I'm writing this was very important. And that's where spirituality has played a big role for me to calm that space for myself.
That's so wonderful.
Yeah.
All right. So,
Work in progress, definitely, though.
which draft was this, which was finally, sent to the publishers and approved?
This was actually the second draft, but in between there were unfinished drafts, and unfinished, maybe 3 drafts that were unfinished. Once I even tried to write it in free verse, I was mad. And I was like, no. Kanishka was already my agent, and we were talking already, and he's like, please don't do this. Don't do free verse. What's wrong with you? You've gone crazy.
The final product is very very accessible as well. It flows so beautifully, and again, it has that lightness to it. So and it is partly historical fiction, of course. You already mentioned it's partly autobiographical, but partly historical fiction. And so it recounts some terrible tragedies that happened, in the Bangladesh past. But you've chosen to tell the tale using magic realism. And there's a certain sweetness with which the ghosts of the past have been written, you know. So how do you put magic in something which is essentially tragic? What feeds your hope?
I mean, I'm definitely not the first to do it. As you know, I mean, Gabriel Garcia Marquez and Rushdie, they've all done it, right? It's not, and I don't know what their reasons are, but if I could imagine, I'm a big fan of Gabriel Garcia Marquez. I used to be, I don't know, lately I find him very intense. I don't know why, but I have some really intense favorites of his. So I think that something so dark, which is also true or has to be told about, approaching it with some sort of subtle realities, was what interested me more as a person. Also, I'm not a practical type person. Like, I'm responsible, but I'm not. I like sort of the unseen, or that felt, what you feel in a place that has gone through war, or what you feel in a place that is just a new country, or subtle things like that. And I think that was something I was I always had. And as I was sort of trying to understand myself better, that subtle part became what I wanted to write about also. Not the thing you can touch or feel, but the psychological effect of certain things and what that might taste like. And those things cannot be told, or can be told perhaps in a in a more non-magic realism way, but it's so much more fun in a magic realism way, I think, to create these worlds and make it something, so I think that was one of the reasons why I did it. And I also just love it. Like it takes me somewhere. It has its own wings, and I like just sort of flying with it. And I have more fun writing magic realism than not. Yeah.
Is that something you'll be writing more of? Magic realism?
Yes. Yeah. I'm working on the second one. Yeah. Magic realism. I think that's my thing. Yeah. So
Okay,
far, it feels like my thing at the moment. Yeah. Yeah.
that's great.
Yeah. So thank
There's
you.
there's also this philosophy, if you may say, that this one of the characters in the book talks about the saddest song, and if I may quote,
Mm,
when you know the rhythms of the
mm,
saddest song, you can sing it to yourself anytime. When you get upset about a lesser miserable thing, the saddest song reminds you of how bad things truly can get, and you instantly feel better. It's such an interesting and beautiful philosophy. So, is it yours? Was it borrowed from a grandmother yourself? Or
No, I think a little bit of my grandma is in it. She did go through this trauma of losing two of her sons. And she had, like, I didn't realize it because, when you're young, you think all grandmas are the same, all grandpa's parents, all are same, right? Your parents must be the same exact way as my parents are. So I never thought about it until later when I realized that she was depressed. There were in her things that were not happy, and she did have like crying bouts for no reason, things like that. And we did not understand mental health or think about those things back then. Everybody knew but she was a very productive woman, and she was a very creative woman, so she was always engaged. So she wasn't like a sad case also, but she had that melancholia, and she had that thing where that anxiety or something that would just come up and be like, well, the worst has already happened, or the worst will happen, like that mentality where there's a pessimism working somewhere.
yeah,
And it's from that fear of just hoping, I think, fear of hope almost, I felt, that uh, hoping makes you positive and optimistic, and she didn't want to hope anymore but just sort of go on with whatever she understood. So very much hers. I hope I didn't inherit that. We all have tendencies of, I think, doing that at times, but yeah, so it's pretty brutal, I think. That's to
yeah.
always remember the worst that has happened to you.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I didn't think about the pessimism in the inherent in this particular philosophy, but it is true. But we're all guilty of it, right? And at some time or the other, we're like, okay, maybe we've had worse, or the other person is having worse. So it's like a comparison. It's almost if you remember, there's this Gandhiji's talisman, right? That used to be in
Mm,
our textbooks, where you were supposed to imagine the poorest person, or the person who had nothing on the street, and then uh, imagine yourself in that situation, or generally compare yourself to it and see where you are and what you have and all of that. But
mm, mm,
yes, there
but
is an
it's
inherent pessimism to that, of course. And like Shurjo says, the flower itself says, look at the sun. So
right.
look at the positivity and the light.
It has to be there. Yes, exactly. So I think it's this dire need of getting out of this saddest song syndrome, or that, that little tendency that still might be there on all of us to just sort of drown whenever we feel a certain thing. Or it's also, there's something beautiful about it, right? In this,
Yeah.
it's something so different and something so personal. I mean, we identify ourselves with our pain, so but we are also the author of our pain, so we have written it for ourselves to believe.
There's this, especially in the first part when Shurjo is in the asymmetrical house in Dhaka. So there's such an oppressive air, there's this melancholia that hangs on it, and the way you have written, it just you can feel that. So why an asymmetrical house? I mean, I can only tell you that it made me feel something. I don't know what it made me feel, but it made me feel
Hmm.
that things are not quite right.
Right,
And
right.
I don't know if it made me think of the Hill House. If you read Shirley Jackson's,
I haven't.
The
No.
Haunting of Hill House, where the house has every room at a very awkward angle, and it's very
Hmm.
unsettling. So
Hmm. Hmm.
that's the kind
Hmm.
of feeling I got from here, and of course that feeling of limbo.
Right, right.
So
Hmm.
that was your idea behind the asymmetrical house.
So I felt just going back a little bit, these houses that I am, that this is based on, this asymmetrical house, actually, there are several houses where I've been to. It's like that, including the one I grew up in.
Okay.
So these were exchange houses from families who were in Dhaka before and Kolkata. So like my family were in Kolkata, they exchanged houses with this family and they moved in.
Mhm.
And I don't know if it was the mentality after leaving your own land, or kind of that separation thing or what, but a lot of the people, like including my grandfather, they just built wings in the house they inherited for convenience, and it just made it very awkward, like you said, unsettling. There was no feng shui ever in my mind, for sure. There were dark rooms that just I never figured out why they were there, storage, but like why.
Mm.
And staircases that were never used and always locked up, and that obviously it made you feel very eerie whenever it was opened, and things would come out of there that were kept, and everything felt like, wow, it's a ghost. So we grew up in a neighborhood like that, with lots of houses that didn't have any thought of future. It was just like, my present moment need is, I need a veranda here. You just build it. And it was almost like they were trying to build, I mean, I don't know if I can say so, like metaphorically, perhaps they were trying to build something or make it their own in this new place, and they just did it in a very, yeah, lackluster manner. But it created a certain mind map in a child's brain, for sure. And it wasn't just me. When my friends from Newtown would come play in our house in Old Town, they just loved it because it was like a maze, and it was this mystery, and it was like, you just didn't know what you would turn a corner and what you might find. But yeah, it, I think, added to to that life. But yeah, that was the story of the asymmetrical, and it had these mezzanine floors, 1.5, and those were also sort of this mysterious spaces. And I decided to put Shurjo in one of them.
That is so interesting. So,
Yeah.
of course, Shurjo and Shurjomukhi are very self-explanatory metaphors, but there is also the motif of the firefly. So,
Mm.
what does that signify, in Shurjo's clan? What was
The
the
one that those who take away the ears and the well, they don't take it away, but it seems like they're just part of it. Is that like you're kind of
there's also this quote, right?
the fragile? Huh,
My
sorry.
in my chest, the firefly in
Yes,
my
yes.
chest. You will
Will not know
do unrest.
unrest.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So there's a Bengali saying, and a friend of mine had told me this. I don't know if it is by a poet or not. In Bangla, it's um, I completely forgot. Buker bhetor jonak poka, which means like in my chest there is a firefly,
Mhm.
and that person had commented that after seeing a picture of my father and I, where he was holding me. And I just really felt like, yeah, like it's like you've got this firefly and you've just kept it very close to your heart, like you just love it, and it just really defined that picture of my father and I when I was young. So when I was trying to create Shurjo and Babu's relationship, I reminded me of that Buker Bhitor Jorak Poka. Like, so I suddenly, these lines were like, oh, firefly in my chest, you'll not know unrest. That makes sense. That's kind of how maybe that love could be explained.
Yeah.
So that's how the firefly came. And also because, Bengalis are so into, I mean, we all are. I think Indians are like, fireflies and these things are just so like part of our every, garden and monsoon and every, sort of the season.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to touch that, and things that are subtle, because there's something subtle about dragonflies and fireflies, and they're fragile. So I
Yeah.
wanted to sort of sprinkle a bit of it into Shurjo.
Also, I think Indian fathers have a way of calling their children, weird animal names.
Yeah.
I've been called a lizard, I've been called a monkey, I've been called many things in Punjabi. So,
Yes, same. Yeah, and also Buri, which is like old woman. I don't know what my mom still sometimes will call me that. I'm like, oh God, now I'm actually feeling like one, so don't.
probably she meant you have an old soul.
Yeah, I'll take that.
All right. So, you know, there's this cliched way in which we book reviewers usually speak about the sort of book that you've written, and it is lyrical and evocative.
Okay, yes,
You
yes,
know?
I've read this. Yes.
Yeah. But so I made it a point not to include it in my review. I was like, I'll find
Well
any other
done.
word. I'll find any other words but this. But I have to grudgingly admit that it is what defines this book the best. It's
Oh,
exactly that. It is lyrical and it is very evocative. And
thank you.
that's not to say that the book itself is cliched, because it's very original. It's just that the influence of music can be organically felt in the text.
Mhm.
So my question is, the best advice for a wannabe writer is usually that you must read more. But how important do you think other art forms such as music, photography, films, even painting art is to become a writer?
Mhm. Very, very, very important. I think we've always been told read more. And yes, I think anyone who wants to be a writer, most of them seriously have read a lot already, is how I look at it. I automatically think that people have read even, I mean, I used to read so much just to make sure if I, to know the difference between good and bad and what do I like and, what do I find? And then, who I was influenced by. I think we go through that phase with reading. And I think that is an important phase to go through to understand what you like, don't like, influence, uh, all of that. But then there comes a time when I think I didn't read anything for like 3 years when I was writing this book because I didn't want to be, I mean, or maybe I read like one book like every 3 months, which was unusual for me, just to, and something very different than what I was writing so that I didn't have to think about it.
Mm.
But at the same time, there was a lot of space for art and, quietness and sort of looking at other ways of expressing emotions. So even photography was a big one. And I think photography helps sort of see things. It can change a perspective. Often when you take a photo and you look at it and you find that how you have looked at it is how you look at it and you haven't seen it until you have framed it. So I
Right.
think I've used photography a lot to understand my own way of looking at it or an emotion. So I think that's very important as well. And to see what it evokes, what words come from it and so forth. So there was a long process here for about a year and a half in between the two drafts where I actually just did this. I had a exhibition here at the exhibition house, and I took out all my photographs that I had collected from my travels, and I wrote a poem to explain what I was feeling, and put it out there with like pressed paper, pressed flowers and leaves. And to me, that was sort of it helped me sum up something that I didn't even see. And so I think it's really important to use different mediums and to tell stories, and especially if you're a visual person, that's really important.
Yeah. And it
I'm
it, it
sure.
helps it helps see things differently, like you're saying. And I love your Instagram, by the way. And I
Thank
have
you.
seen some of the pictures that you post. And you can see that, you have a particular way of looking at things, and that is what translates into your writing as well. So yeah, I also believe that, if every form of art, basically, even if you're not good at it, if you're practicing it, if you're appreciating it in others, probably it feeds your own creativity as well.
Totally. And even, there are chapters in the book, like chapter 4, which is Santori's Bhagirathi River chapter, misunderstood reflections.
Yeah.
I remember listening to, a lot of Bhatiyali type songs. Bhatiyali is basically songs of the fishermen in
Okay.
Bengali, or water, like that was like more baul, folksy, just to sort of feel, that riverness, around me. and not doing it maybe even intentionally, but feeling like doing it because I was writing something related to it. So those moods are there that were created through things I was playing. It was COVID times, it was great. One could explore things without any time limit and deadlines. So yeah. So I'm glad you also feel the same way about music and all the photography and films.
And since you're mentioning the Bhagirathi episode in general, I mean, that whole subplot or a digression, whatever it is an essential part of the story. But
Yes.
on its own, I think it could make
Yes.
a beautiful short film.
Oh yeah. Oh my God, that's such a great idea. I should pitch that.
Because
In fact, yeah, please.
it just it brought up such emotions, and it is a very different emotion, because this is not something like most of the reading we do. We sympathize, we empathize, we see ourselves in that, but this is an emotion that is so different. The way she felt about the water in her country, and being away from that water. I mean, I have not seen things the way a person like her must have, and felt the things that she must have. And to be given a window into this sort of a soul, it was just a very beautiful and surreal experience, even if it was sad.
Thank you so much. So that was the first chapter of my first draft, similar-ish. And that's why it was really hard to leave, because I loved it so much. But it makes for a sad, like the whole thing becomes a little bit like, has that tone. Yeah, that chapter for me also is a very dear one, for sure. With Bhagirathi, and rivers in Bengal are a really big thing. And in Pondicherry, I sometimes bump into, like, there are people in the ashram in their 80s and 90s who had moved pre-47 from East Bengal to West Bengal and then to Pondicherry. And when they see me, they will, or, when we talk, they'll ask, is it still the same? Is this still the same? Is that river still the same? And a lot of time it's the river. My village went under the river, or this. So I think we are just a very river driven, sort of kind. And then that's why I really wanted to, it was fun for me to understand also, how do I work with this? I know the time is probably, you have.
Yeah, should we just terminate this call and probably start another?
Sure. I'll just get the other link and come back.
All right.
See you. Bye.
Like, you started off with your development work, your humanitarian work and all of that. And was this something you always wanted to do, or was it like these were ideas at the back of your head, and it was like one day after maybe 10 years of working, you finally thought it's time for me to put everything on paper? Or was it something you were just scribbling on the side, while you were going to work or whatever? And then it clicked that these things are actually making a connection and probably, deserve a book or something.
So I had a thing for writing from a very young age, actually reading. I didn't know if I could write. I didn't even think about it. And then I think in my teen years is when I started writing, and just in a very similar manner, not in a very similar manner, but my father did pass away when I was 15. So that happened, and that's sort of the outlet for me to speak about him or write about him or think about him was like, I had to put it into some kind of art form, and usually it was writing. So that kind of opened up. And then when I was early 20s, a Bangladeshi newspaper, the Daily Star, which is an English daily, they wanted me to do a weekly column, and I named it Under a Different Sky. And for about 10 years, every Tuesday, I would have a 700 to 750 page, 50 words column, which sort of got me into this, this rhythm of every week writing something. And then I didn't know in the first couple, I was living in the US, and I didn't know if anybody was reading it. Sometimes I would get emails, but, and then when I went to Bangladesh in 2005, I found out people were reading it, and it was really great. And so it slowly built a bit of confidence. And, I don't have a formal degree in all this writing stuff. And so, I think I grew up still in the 80s when like degrees are really important. You must study what you do and all that. I think that was always in my head, like, but I didn't. So in that sense, and then I started writing something longer, like a novel type thing, and I tried a few times to approach it, but the stories of 71 kept on coming into it, like almost like an intruder. And it was annoying, and it just felt like, do I write about this? Then there were short stories I was scribbling down just to get it out, but always this interruption, and it just didn't feel like I could write anything else but this. And then I think I finally faced it in 2015. I'd gone to this Iowa Summers Writers Workshop in US, and I think that kind of helped unlock something. And in 2015, I started thinking about it more, and that's how it sort of came. It just, yeah, I don't know where and how it sort of sparred out of, but it's something I had to write before I can write anything else, is how I look at it. Now I'm free to write something that's
Out of your
different.
system now.
Yeah, I think I was carrying things for others also. Like, it feels like, okay, this is now done, and it's been a life's goal, and that has been done. And thank you so much that it could happen. And now I write something else that's not related. But I think identity and boundaries and borders are always going to be a theme in my writing somehow or other. Yeah, it's
Because
just
you're a
who
theme
I
in
am.
life, right? You're always grappling with these issues in your life as well. So, of
Yes.
course, they will
Yeah.
come out in your writing, your, mine,
Mm.
anybody's writing for that matter. So, yeah.
Exactly. What we think about will come out. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I recently came across this quote on Instagram, and you might recognize it. It says, one night, a friend lent me a book of short stories by Franz Kafka. I went
Mm.
back to the pension where I was staying and began to read the Metamorphoses. The first line almost knocked me off the bed. I was so surprised. The first line reads, as Gregor Samsa awoke that morning from uneasy dreams, he found himself transformed in his bed into a gigantic insect. So when I read that line, I thought to myself that I didn't know anyone was allowed to write like things like that. If I had known, I would have started writing a long time ago. So I
Mm.
immediately started writing short stories. Do you know who this quote is by?
No.
It's Gabriel Garcia Marquez.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So,
Wow.
since magic realism is your thing for now, and you do, I mean, you're a fan of Marquez himself. It's not about Marquez, the question, but I would like to know what book or books would you say knocked you off your bed, in a similar fashion? Like, okay, I
Mm.
could write, if these are the kind of stories that people are writing, I should probably be writing
Mm.
kind of stories as well. And so, which were these stories, these books, which inspired or allowed you to be the writer that you are?
Mm. I think, besides 100 Years of Solitude, which is, of course, a classic, Marquez's Chronicles of a Death Foretold is something. It's it's like a novella, but I just remember reading it and thinking, should I read it again, right away? Because it was like, how? And then I had to like distance myself from it because it had affected me so much. I don't know. It was just this emotion you had, you know, put in this novella. You couldn't put it down, and you could feel the feelings after. So that's something that, but besides Gabriel Garcia Marquez, I'll go back to my childhood actually. And I didn't look at it as a writer, but now that I think about it, definitely have been influenced by Shukumar Roy and, his crazy fantasy, weird world. And his, he had a very unique way of expressing things and putting things together that nobody would think to put together. And, it was just a very fun, silly, but deep also, and it had a larger meaning. And Satyajit Ray as well, his son, and his, Gupiga and Baghava in those movies and all of childhood favorites that has formed, I think, humor for me, what is funny and what is pretty and what was, aesthetically, what appeals to me. And then later on, I think the book that really got me was Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five, again about war. And, he had gone to war in World War II, I believe, and came back, and it took him 10 years, and he wrote this book. And he was writing, most of it was written to his then wife as letters, and many drafts. He wanted to talk about his experience, but then he had put it into somebody who was almost a handicapped person. Like the hero, the protagonist is a little bit like off balance. in mentally. And but then he is the hero. And so then you see it from this unique caricature way, the whole thing, the war itself, and his narration is this from this very simple way of telling the story, but so much and so intense and so true. And such a short thing, but it's not a long book, yet it had this power. So I think that was also like, wow, how do this man do that? Do this? How does he do sarcasm so well or humor so well, which I still don't know how to. I think it's just wow, people who can do that. Also, Jennifer Egan's first book, or not first book, the first book I fell in love with is A Visit from the Goon Squad, where she has all these characters come together, and each chapter is of a different character, but the story moves on, with this thread. And I thought that was brilliant, the way she had done it. I think she got a Pulitzer or a Booker for it. I'm not sure which. And then her second book, sequel to this, was not her second book, but a sequel to this is The Candy House, which came out last year, and I also loved it for similar reasons. Thinking about the future in a different manner through different characters. So that really appeals to me. I think you have to be very intuitive and just detail oriented and patient to create such a world, and not just trying to outline things. I feel like both Cart and Jennifer is more detailed and there's a plan, but with Cart Vonnegut, it just feels like it pours out of him. He just knows where to end up. Yeah. That's something I aspire to, or I envy even. And the last but not least is Daniel Moinuddin. And when I read In Other Rooms, Other Wonders, it was like, why wasn't this book around 20 years ago? It felt like a portion of a storytelling that is usually muffled is suddenly out and spoken in and written in a way that was just grabbed everybody's attention. So yeah, I appreciated his honesty and his way of showing the community. So yeah.
These are all such wonderful recommendations, and I'm going to look them up.
Super. If you read Cart Vonnegut, let me know what you think. I don't know if it's the American in me that loves him, but I think it's not beyond. I think it's beyond that. Yeah.
You're right about humor. It's just so difficult to get right.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know if it's I don't want to make it a gender thing, because that's just not the way to do it. But I do wonder for my own personal individual self, because I'm a woman, is there some sort of a barrier in my head to be really, really funny? Is it just, or that you wouldn't say something completely ridiculous, that could be like White Tiger of Arvind Adiga, to do something so drastic, and there's humor in, so much humor in it, as well, sarcasm and dark humor. Yeah. I just think that, why is it, maybe we were different people, of course, but then I think I want to, figure out what is it that makes me, I think I'm funnier in person than when I'm writing. So how do I become more funny when I'm writing without failing? Yes.
But a dictaphone or something always on, so that you can record your jokes, which you've been cracking in conversations.
No, actually, that's my worst. I do not know how to tell jokes. Then I start laughing before the punchline, or I forget it. So that's definitely not.
We told him a couple of questions, and now he's trying to create his own questions. He's trying to write or frame his own jokes. He's trying to frame his own jokes, and they're terrible. 1,000 terrible jokes. After that, maybe one joke is a little bit funny. So we're going through a bit of that, but we want to, guide him through the process. We don't want to stop him.
Can I join the class, please? I need this also.
We need a lot of patience to listen to those jokes.
My friends are they've given up on me. I think they're just don't say anything. Don't say a joke.
They say write what you know and write what you know best. So
I'll just stay with my stuff. Yeah, forget it.
I find it very difficult to write down something like this year itself. I thought I'll start journaling, and of course it's a personal thing. I'm not writing it in a public space or anything, but still I find it difficult to write about anything sentimental. And I think it's a personality trait. Everybody has a different personality trait, and for me, if I'm veering towards something very, very sensitive or very sad, I automatically make it funny in a self-deprecating way or something. It probably is my way of coping, uh, something traumatic or whatever. But I, in fact, find what you do very difficult. To
So
write about
interesting.
feelings is something I find very difficult to do.
Okay. Okay.
So
I
it's
guess we all have our own like approach, because it's like yeah, interesting because yeah, it's not always that you want to hold that thing and like look at it and be like, okay, this is what this is, because it's not easy to.
yeah.
But I think I also wish I was more like you, where I could make it funny.
I think I would want to be more like you. Probably a mental block. It's probably that I'm not able to process certain things. I'm not ready to go there. And every great author basically goes where we, the readers, don't want to go or don't have the guts to go. And then when we read it, we are like, we could have only have gone there because of this particular book or because of this particular story. And otherwise, we would never have touched that side of our souls, basically. So
That's beautiful way
I
to
would
put
say
it.
you keep doing what you're doing.
All right, fine, I'll do that. But yeah, beautiful, beautiful way of putting it, And I think it reminds me of like Catcher in the Rye when you were 16 and you're reading it and you're like, yes, this is exactly what my life is, I mean, even if it's not. He had gotten that teenage angst so well.
Do you also feel like you outgrow certain books and you're grateful to read a particular book at a particular age, because if you had read that book 20 years ago, you would not have got it?
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. And I feel that a lot with Bengali books. So I grew up reading Bengali books and only started reading English when I was in the US. I wasn't I didn't gravitate towards it. But I remember, loving Shamak Majumdar, who just passed away 3 days ago, when as a teenager, or Shunil Ganguly and Shishindu and all of these guys who were like Leela Majumdar. She's also, a big name. But then later on, like I just remember like not, reading it, but not really getting into it at all. And like now I can't. I just can't. Like it just doesn't work for me. But I'm glad that it did the part that it did. But yeah, I do grow out of things quite easily. And if I can get into a book within the first couple of chapters, I don't try, which is a bad habit. But then I'm like, there's so many books I have to read. So let me just.
Exactly. I think one of my greatest fears, one is, of course, what if I died? What would that do to my child now? That's always on the top of my head.
Sure.
Rachel Cusk wrote in her book that mothers are not supposed to die. We're just not allowed
I
to.
like that.
So
I like that.
and during this the COVID times and all of that, of course, that weighs heavily on you, because before that you don't really think about that, but now people your age or younger than you have been affected by this, and we saw some very terrible things during those times. So then
Yes.
these things weigh on you, and then I read this and I was like, yeah, I mean, whatever I can do, I want to do to survive.
Yes.
I lost my mother not very early in life, but even at losing my mother at 30 was also very, very affecting, and
Of course.
still weighs on my psychology even after so many years. So I would not want that to happen to my child. So that's one fear, which is a
Yes.
legitimate, valid fear. But the other fear is that I will not be able to finish all the books that I bought if I died. And of course, I won't be able to, because I keep buying all the books.
Same here. And it's such a guilt, like just looking at it and being like, I even prioritize them once in a while. I'm like, okay, you're next. Really, you are, just, I completely get it. Yes.
Yeah,
But the
but I
first
think
fear is also very, very, very legit. Yes.
books do have a way of finding you when you need them the most. That also is something I believe. Like if I haven't read
Very
this
true.
book in 5 years, maybe on the sixth year, I would need that book and it would come to me and I'll pick it up automatically. So
Yes.
it's just that I hope to, outlive those years
Yeah,
that I can
absolutely.
pick it up one day.
You will. Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
that will be there at 80 and 90, and I don't know, if I cross 100 it would still be there, because such beautiful books are being written and there are so many back issues as well. And practically
Yeah.
speaking, we will not be able to read everything that's ever written, even the most beautiful
No.
things we won't be able to read. And it's just
And
such
will
a,
they find us and will we find them,
yeah.
But I have a question for you, actually. Do you think, we often hear that people don't read anymore and we have changed, but what do you think? Like, as a, this avid reader and a avid reviewer, you're really in this world, and what do you think?
I used to think that, and in fact, it's something that happened to me as well, because when I'm a lawyer by profession. So when I started
Okay.
working, I did not have the time to read. I was still reading. I would not say that reading ever goes out of fashion, because I was reading maybe long form nonfiction articles and whatever I was able to lay my hands on. So I was reading, but I wasn't reading like just the books and that start to finish the way we are able to read when we are students.
Mhm.
And this is one of my biggest regrets, that when I had the time, I did not have the money to buy all the books in the world.
Right, right, of
And
course,
somehow
yeah.
we grew up in a time when we did not even know much about what are the, we knew about the classics, then we knew about the Jeffrey Archers and all of those popular books. And I have wasted my hostel life reading Mills and Boons, because we did not have TV, and that was very entertaining for us. But now that I know how much, and the variety that has been written, I have this urge to read whatever I can. And that's something which brought me to the to Instagram, basically, and this space where I found a whole community of people. And that's where I realized that it's coming back in fashion. Even if it was ever out of fashion, people do want to come back to reading. And the the way the reels, etc., have been affecting our attention span, it is very important to come back to reading as well, because that focus is so important. And
Yes.
uh, and I would want all the children to read as much as possible, whatever they want to read. Even if it's not just the kind of books that we think they should be reading. Like, my son is a lot into toilet humor these days, and there is a book being written about that. So I would get
Right.
his comics as long as he's reading. And even on Bookstagram, I have seen a lot of young kids. Maybe they're picking up heavy stuff. I don't know how much they're understanding, but they're picking it up, and they're, even if it's an accessory, someday probably they will understand it. So
Wow.
so I
That's
even if it's a small community, it's never going to die.
I agree with you. And I think I felt this when I was in Dhaka Lit Fest early in Jan, earlier this year. And people were coming out with this many books, and books were getting sold out. And, it was just such a great thing to see that the thirst, especially after realizing what we haven't been doing, reading, for example, during COVID, like back into like, no, I want this in my life. I really felt, even not just Dhaka, but Kolkata and Goa and wherever I had gone, I really felt young people were a
Yeah.
huge part of it, and it really felt good. It just, you know I think we are just too critical and want to say things, but I think we should just hold our tongue about this.
And I think wait, like, the best book comes to you when you need it. So
Yes,
reading is also something which will find you if you need it in your life. And,
very
that's
true.
the way I feel. And I was about to say something, I've forgotten.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, even the need for like new language, to like not new language as in another language, but a different way of expressing something. And there is that, so suddenly you feel this thirst of, my vocab has been the same, I speak the same way, I've
Yeah,
been around the same people, I really want to just read something
yeah.
that is absolutely different,
Yeah.
and it just right
That's
there.
interesting, because why I started reading in the first place. I had quit my job because I had to take care of my child, and I thought I'll start a very pop culture like blog, and
Okay.
I will make listicles about some movies or something. So I originally wanted to be a film critic, because I have no training in literature, and I thought I have watched
Doesn't matter.
films all my life, so I would probably be more qualified for that. I could not
Mm.
write even the first sentence for a blog post of a listicle. I have
Wow.
been writing professionally, but it's a very legal sort of a writing, and I just it just didn't feel right, that the opening sentence, it felt very tried, and I was like, I've forgotten how to write, and I need to read for if I want to be able to write someday a
Of course.
proper sentence. And that is how I started reading, and now I read more than I watch. So
Wow.
the movies have taken a back seat, the series have taken a back seat, and I just like to read. And the other thing I realized, and this is something probably people will realize when they do pick up a book, is that often all this the social media, or um, even consuming like long form television and all, it leaves your brain in a certain state where you're just receiving an idea, and you're probably still processing it. But there was a day when I was like, I don't feel like doing anything. I binge watched something. I did that the entire day, and I felt a certain heaviness in my brain. And then I picked up a book of essays, and 3 pages of that essays, I could feel like my brain had gone for a walk.
Wow.
Yeah, so I could feel the things clearing up a little bit, and I was able to sleep better. I did not have the visuals that I had been watching all day. They were not just, weighing on my head. And it was like, somebody's cleaned up the
The
passage in my
tunnels.
brain.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
I think it's not force anybody to read, but when they do read and when they do experience this for themselves, like, I mean, I haven't meditated, but that's the way people talk about meditation as well.
No, it's really the same. I think that's meditation. No, reading is a meditation. To
Yeah.
me, it is definitely that. We're focused in a different manner. And
Yes.
yeah, you're absolutely right about this whole OTT, which I'm really happy about. It's great how much we have moved forward. And there are some gems out there,
Of course.
and, beautiful things are happening. But then also there is also this sort of like a packaged maybe gem or not,
Yeah.
that people we end up watching, and you're like, why did I do that to myself? But yeah, I
Not
completely
actively doing
understand.
anything. When you're reading, you're also using your brain. I read, I'm forgetting the book, but this guy said that reading is a full contact sport,
Hmm.
because when you're reading it, you're using your own brain to process that thing as well. You're
Hmm.
filling up those images yourself. They are leaving some gaps which you can fill up yourself, and so it's like a two-way street. Uh,
Wow.
of course, it has to be guided by the writing.
Sure, but that's a
I,
beautiful way of
I
putting
would
it.
just like people to discover reading, for themselves,
Yeah.
for their own
Yeah. I'm
reading.
actually reading, you must have read it. I think I've seen it in your Insta that you read it, or you had put something on it, Victory City. And I'm reading it now, and I'm just thinking of it because
City,
of Salman
oh, Rushdie. I
Rushdie.
haven't read it.
Yeah,
I haven't read
you
it yet.
haven't read.
My library has
Okay,
a very long hold on that book.
I'm sure. But yeah, it's just one of those things where you're like, the bigger picture of that a writer can portray through the minute things is something that he is reminding me again, while reading it. So yeah. And you're willing to walk into that world, right? That your willingness to engage with that, I think
The willingness
that
to
is
suspend the disbelief.
exactly. Absolute. Yeah, this is not true, but is it? Kind of thing. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this has been very interesting. Last question. I mean, you are writing something. What is it that you're writing, and what can you tell us about it?
Yes. So this is my, like, it's been crazy few months after Shurjo, in a very beautiful manner, of course. And I did not expect, like, that there would be certain things I would be doing, traveling more a bit and all of this. And so it's settling down now. And I started writing this after I had signed my contract, or right with Penguin, right before, actually. I was like, all right, I'm just gonna go back to writing before I wasn't getting an offer yet and all that. And so it's called Easy Love, and it's it's inspired by a line of Rabindranath Tagore, whose birthday was yesterday, I believe, in Bengali month, and 7th was in US, or so stupid English calendar. Um, so there's this. I don't know if you've seen it. Charulata is a movie made by Satyajit Ray, and it's based on this Noshtuni, this novel of Rabindranath Tagore. And in there's a line, effortless contentment is not easily attained or effort, so to be happy effortlessly, it's not an easy task. And in Bangla, it's Shahoj Shuk, Shahoj Noy. And I really love that line, because to be in ease and in that, mellowness, mellow ease, laxity, you need so much to go right in the world to be in that state. So it's called that, inspired by that line and feeling that we all want to embody and in everything. And it's about a tiny city by the bay, much like where I live, but it's magic realism, and it's set in a place that's in the future, when there are no, actually it's not future or past, you can probably figure out what you want it to be, or make it what you want it to be. There are no borders left, but people are still holding on to identities. Okay. And they come to this city, 9 characters come to this city, where the city takes away all your bag or your memories. So it's forming, I probably said too much without even forming the whole thing, but yeah, that's the concept that I'm working with. Let's see where it goes.
Yeah, there's nothing, I don't think there's anything that's going to be easy about the book.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
But it does remind me, I don't know if I've understood it correctly, but it reminds me of that Bawarchi dialogue, which is a quote by who I have forgotten, but it is so simple. What? It is so difficult to be simple. It is so simple to be happy, but so difficult to be simple.
Yes,
That was the quote from Bawarchi.
Exactly. We just create such things, and Tagore was really good at sort of writing about that. Lots of different songs that touched on it. So trying to explore that and understand that better for myself. And so through experience, maybe writing about it and figuring it out through, magic. Let's hope it continues.
Yeah, of course, the magic will continue, and we're looking forward to
fingers crossed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this conversation.
No, thank you, Pradarshini. I'm so happy to have connected.
Yes. I've been wanting to do this for a very long time, and finally I was able to. So I'm glad, and I'm really looking forward to your next.
Thank you so much. It means a lot coming from you. And I've been, it's been a pleasure and more talking to you. It was fun and chill and good. And yes, I do pray that I keep writing, and thank you for giving me the space to speak about Shurjo and writing and chat. And thanks to Purple Pencil as well. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
You take good care.
I'll try to discuss the next book also with you whenever it comes out.
Oh my God, that would be so. Yes, aspiration out there, wishes out there. Let's put the intention out. It's happening.
Thank you. All the best for the book, and thank you so much. You have a wonderful evening ahead.
Thank you. Say hi to your son for me. Take care. Bye-bye. See you. Bye. Bye. Bye.